For most of us, things in our lives do change over time, or maybe I should say sometimes they evolve. That might be a better word. But regardless, what we know is we need to update things on occasion, and our company information is no exception to that. When I initially created our company file, I actually didn't worry too much about putting in all of the addresses and phone numbers. At that point in time, I was just trying to get a company file made in Peachtree. But now I want to go back and fill in that information. First of all, so it's there. Secondly, so it's accurate. And thirdly, so the software can actually use that information to produce different types of reports and output. It's actually a very simple thing to do as long as you know where to go, and it's actually from the Maintain menu. So I'll move up and click on Maintain. Come down about, 3/4 of the way or so and give Company Information a click. Now it may look just a little bit different than it did originally in the Company Wizard, but the basic information is still here. Having your name, your address, city, state, zip, telephone numbers, websites, employer ID numbers, those types of things are a critical part. You'll also notice at the bottom of this dialog that we do have the directory where this file is actually stored. If you ever need to know where a file is, for example, if you need to find it or back it up, recover it, something like that, then this is a place to come to see where that directory is. At the bottom of the dialog, you'll also see that we have the posting method, if we're using direct deposit, if we're using any of Peachtree's managed payroll, and what our accounting method is. The posting, direct deposit, and managed payroll, of course, are options. They have features where we can go in and make choices. But you will notice that our accounting method is grayed out. That's one of those things that we can't change once we've created the company file. With that said, I'm going to go ahead and just make a couple of changes here. I'm going to go ahead and fill in my address, my city, my state, my zip, and see what other things I might want to update while I'm here. Our spa is actually located in New Cummings, Oregon, and the street address is 6754 North Apricot Way. You'll notice that as I work through the city, the state, and the zip, that I actually get drop-downs. And that's something that I think Peachtree does that's a little bit different than other programs. You see it both in Peachtree as well as in ACT that's also created by Sage. What they're doing is creating a lookup. So once you have an address, it's very simple to use that drop-down to update information. In this case, I haven't entered this information before, so I'm just typing into the fields. One of the things I want to caution you about is that the field that comes after city, state, and zip is country with an R and not county. A lot of people confuse this and try to put in the county. They're thinking maybe about taxes that they may have that are county-based. This is actually country, and you can leave it blank unless you're doing international business. The website, fax, email, those types of information are important, but I'm not going to make you watch me type here. I'm going to go ahead and finish this up by just clicking the OK button on the top left of the window. So we can see that we can go in and change that company information at any time. You may need to do that at certain times as your company grows, you move locations, you change phone numbers, all of those types of things that really are just things that happen in life. Not a big deal, and Peachtree certainly doesn't care about those types of simple changes. What is sometimes a little bit more important as it relates to the integrity of our file and our accounting is actually working with some of the global options. For example, we need to set global options for the software and possibly even work with the date that the system is using. To do this, I'm actually going to move from the Maintain menu over to the Options menu, and at this point, I'm just going to choose Global Options. As you would imagine, Global Options is, well, global in nature, so it covers an awful lot of things. We're not going to go over all of the different defaults and things as we work through the samples, but once I show you where things are at, I expect that you will go back in and kind of take a little bit of a look at what's available here on each of the tabs. First of all, for example, we have accounting. Now, it certainly makes sense that we need to set up accounting to work the way that we want for an accounting program. There are some things here that you may never need to change. For example, how decimal entry is done. There are other things that you may want to change. For example, in the middle of this dialog, we have a section called Hide General Ledger Accounts. And people often think, well, defaults are good, which they can be, but what does this really mean? Hiding general ledger accounts means as you're working through Peachtree, are you going to see that double entry bookkeeping and things that's happening in the background, or is Peachtree going to hide that from your view? It's not that you can't access it, it's just whether it will be visible in your default windows. For example, do you want to hide general ledger accounts when you're working with accounts receivable? For example, when you're making quotes and sales orders and invoicing and so forth. The same is true for accounts payable as well as payroll entry. I'm going to go ahead and remove the check mark for accounts receivable. So as I work with those types of transactions in those windows, I will have access to the general ledger accounts, so I can keep an eye on what's happening in the background. At the bottom, we have an Other Options section. Other is usually just that miscellaneous that wouldn't fit into one nice category. Things like warn if a record was changed but not saved. Now I actually like that, because if I'm changing things and I haven't saved it, I would like to be notified of that. We also have the opportunity to do things like hide inactive records. Remember that Peachtree doesn't allow us to delete anything that has activity behind it, so hiding inactive records is a way to simplify our list. After all, over the course of time, we hope that you keep all of your customers and all of your transactions, but you certainly may have some that haven't been customers for a long time. So do you actually want to see those people or not? I'm thinking that hiding inactive records will be a way to simplify what I'm working with in Peachtree, so I'll go ahead and give that one a click. There are, of course, General tabs, Peachtree Partner tabs, and then the last one is Spelling, and it may not seem like it belongs in an accounting program, but I do want to click on Spelling for just a moment. Fortunately, for those of us who tend to maybe type faster than we can think, if that makes sense, I like to have a spell check, and most programs these days include spelling. Now that's actually a good thing, because we can just type things out and it's going to draw our attention by putting what it considers to be misspelled or questionable words in red. Just like you have spelling options in your other basic applications, the same is true here with similar options. For example, do I want to check spelling as I type? Do I want to check spelling each time I save or close? On the right-hand side, you'll also see different options such as ignoring capitalized words, mixed case, words with numbers, all uppercase, internet addresses, which is always a good idea, because since those don't have spaces, they are very infrequently considered correctly spelled words. What about doubled words if you type the same word twice? Case-sensitive suggestions might be nice, suggesting splitting words, and do you want to autocorrect misspelled words? Now, a lot of people have opinions about autocorrect. The good news is I don't have to deal with it. It's just going to fix things that I mistype. For example, ADN should be automatically corrected to AND. But, on the other hand, it might be changing words that you intended to spell the way that you did. This kind of depends on your industry and how often you're using industry-specific words, proper names, those types of things. So kind of play with that one a little bit. You can always come in and turn it on if it becomes an issue. My recommendation is probably to leave it off. Maybe most importantly through this whole thing is which dictionary are you using? Believe it or not, there is a difference between, say, American English and British English. So you want to make sure that you're using the correct dictionary. Otherwise, you're going to have a lot of misspellings, or it's going to try to convert words to spellings that you're not familiar with. Those are some of the global options that we can address. As I said, there's a lot of information on these tabs, and I recommend that you come in and take a look at each of the tabs individually so you know what's available and you also know what can be modified. I'm done with it for the moment, so I'm going to go to the upper right and click OK. Then I want to go back to the Options menu and just show you another option that we have here. We were in Options Global to begin with. Now I want to go to Change System Date. If you recall, our system date shows kind of in the middle top of our Peachtree window, and that lets us know what the current system date is. It's based on our computer date, generally speaking. What I can do here, though, is I can actually change the date. Now, we don't want to do this very often. There needs to be a specific reason why you would do that. But if you ever notice that the system date is incorrect, or if you need to change it for a certain purpose, it's simply a matter of going into the Options menu, making your change here, and then saying OK. I do not want to do that, so I'm going to just cancel out. Back up at the Options menu, just a couple more things to discuss that's here. First of all, if you're having internet connection issues using Peachtree, you can define the internet connection. By default, the system is going to come up and you initially install and say, I think I've configured it the way you need it. Do you want me to go ahead and do that? Usually, yes is the best answer. But if you're having issues, you can go in and define the connection itself. Another nice feature that's either on or off is when you start Peachtree, if you want to start with the last open company. That way you don't have to click on the File menu, go to Recent Files, or navigate through a directory structure. This is usually something that I like to keep on. The last thing in this menu is Default Information, and it has a flyout with default information for customers, vendors, employees, payroll setup wizard, inventory items, jobs, statements, invoices, and the general ledger. These are things that we're going to be working with throughout the course, and you can access them both through Options, Default Information, or if you go to the Maintain menu, you also can see some of these options. While we're talking about default information that may need to be updated every once in a while, I actually want to take a look at my general ledger options. So I just popped over to the Maintain menu, primarily just to show you that there's two different places you can access this, from Options or Maintain. I'm going to move all the way down here to Default Information. From the flyout, I'll go ahead and choose the General Ledger, which is at the very bottom. This actually is one of the simplest dialogues you'll see when you're setting defaults. The General Ledger only has one default to be set, and that is something called the rounding account. The rounding account is an account that is used when you show things with rounded numbers. For example, most companies don't want to see the cents when they're doing reporting. They only want to see even dollar amounts. And if you're a large company, you may not even care about individual dollars, tens or hundreds of dollars. Sometimes you're setting those to round to the nearest thousand, or, dare I say, even the most millions. That would be nice. Maybe that can be one of our goals. The point here is that when you round numbers, Peachtree has to do something with the extra numbers. Now, there was a movie made quite a while ago about this entire thing, about how banks have to round when we have percentages and things that are given, like interest rates. Well, that's a whole different thing. We'll talk about entertainment at a different time. But the rounding account is exactly the same thing. Peachtree, because it follows GAAP, can't simply get rid of it or not show it. It has to do something with it. And this is the account that it uses. The recommended account is retained earnings, and we're not going to get into all of the accounting reasons why that's the best choice, but unless you have a really good reason, and you've been told probably by an accountant to do something different, you just want to make sure that retained earnings is the set account and leave it be. Because I'm not going to change it, I'll just go ahead and say cancel. And we've been able to go in and update some information, as well as ensure that the software is in pretty good shape to work the way I want with general overall settings.